o'clock, and we want to welcome everyone for coming out here. My name is Bill Stucker. I'm president of the Herrin Area Historical Society. We do have a few board members able to make it here today. We have Gordon Pruitt and Bert Gordon and Carl Goodwin and Becky Bostain, and if you all would raise your hands and wave and say whatever. We have Doris Fry over here who takes care of our Facebook. If you ever want to know what programs and things are going on, you're welcome to check that. I do want to make mention, we run from October to October, so for all of our members, the dues are due again coming up. They're 25 for singles and 35 for couples, and we try to put on a program once a month, and this is our 8th year running, so we've been doing very, very well, as you can see. With the programs, we have great programs, and we work alongside with the Herrin Library. We appreciate that so much. And here we have Lisa Carnegie, who is with the library, that does so much with it, because she's also a Historical Society member, and so we tie into together a lot. And and Jenna back there, you wave. And she helps us a lot with. She's one of the docents. And for those who don't know, we also have the Harrison Bruce Historical Village over at John A. Logan College, and we have it open twice a month with the Harrison House that used to be here in Herrin. And we teach kids in the one-room schoolhouse every October and every April. And so that's coming up, so all of our volunteers are really tied up a lot all month long with that. In fact, April ended up going all the way into May 12th last year because so many schools just kept coming and coming. But we welcome you all here, and here's Lisa.
Well, I want to say welcome. I'm so glad that we packed the room like this. I met Susan Plater, which was Bill Plater, who played Cactus Pete for 18 years. I met his wife at church one day, and this all came from that. And I had the support of the Historical Society, the library itself, put the bill for the supplies and stuff needed for this. And of course I want to thank the Historical Society for always coming through with their snacks and their support. We have had a lot of trouble we've had technical issues, and I think Bill Plater is doing this, he's haunting me, because I I in an interview where he talked about, the ones that were messed up were the best. That's what the people really liked, because it was so funny. So prepare to be entertained, because I wasn't able to do any of my bells and whistles. There's no fade-ins or fade-outs. We just had to get the doggone thing to play, and so here we are. Also, the biggest person or people to help out was WSIL. Mark Kiesling is a saint, because he put up with all my emails back and forth asking for permission to use a lot of the stuff. They also provided the video that you're going to see and the still photographs. We also have a very big fan of Mr. Plater's. If there's anybody bigger than you all, his name is Mark Tullis. He sent me CDs to help with the program. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to ask Bart, we're going to turn off that side lights and leave this side on so I can see my notes. There we go. And we'll get going. Okay, so as you can see, that video came from TV3's 40th anniversary, which was in 1993, and we are now actually, they're in their 64th year. I wanted to give you a little bit of the background. I don't know if any of you remember Terry Caldwell and Kim Sweeney. They were on Channel 3 for the 40th anniversary video, and Terry Caldwell explains about UHF versus VHF. So I wanted to play a little bit of that, and then we'll get to Cactus Pete.
For many of us, it's hard to imagine life without television. But not that long ago, there was no TV in our area. In 1953, WSIL pioneered the new technology, and this week we're looking back at the station's history in a special report called Look Who's 40. Terry Caldwell will take us through the years. He joins us now live in the place where it all began. Terry?
That's right, Kathy. This was the first home of WSIL TV. It was built at 21 West Poplar Street in Harrisburg. Now, you wouldn't believe some of the things that went on in this building over the years. There was all sorts of talent here. It all started 40 years ago when the first signals went off that tower. The people of the area had a TV station of their own.
This is WSIL TV, Channel 22, Harrisburg, Illinois, signed on with a test pattern so that we can make technical adjustments to our transmitting equipment.
That sign-off day in 1953 was a real relief for the people who had been working months to get the station on the air. Oral Turner and Charles Farrar were the main men. They started the area's first TV station as a hedge to protect their movie business.
Let me take a picture here. We can see at the end that television was going to hurt the theater, didn't it?
I got the world on a string.
The early 50s was a vibrant time in America. The country was booming and TV was too, but there was no station in our area. The few people who had sets and an antenna tall enough to pick up St. Louis only station opened their homes to curious neighbors. They wanted a station easier to watch. The WSIL pioneers were working on it.
And it was a crash course because when he got about to go on the air, he didn't have his license. And he really worked hard to get that engineer's license.
Finally, after months of building, learning, and testing, WSIL was on the air. Now the job was putting on programs.
What did you know about TV?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It looked interesting and finding nothing. Nobody knew anything about it except Jim Bowen.
And I had worked in New York on the Kate Smith show and early Hattie Jane show production staff.
Boland was the station's biggest celebrity. He could do it all, from a crusty character named Cactus Pete to the newscast to pure entertainment.
I thought, well, why not an amateur show? People love to perform. Never thinking that the Beehive would become as popular as it was on Saturday nights.
As host of the Beehive, Boland filled in the talent holes. He played vibes, drums, and piano. And oh, could he play. He still can.
I got away with women. They like my dreamy eyes. I got away with women.
Okay, so we know that Jim Boland played the first Cactus Pete. He brought that character back to Southern Illinois from Ohio. He had been working out there, and we were fortunate enough that he brought that back, and WSIU put Cactus Pete on the air. The first day that they actually went on the air was Sunday, December 6, 1953, and I found a news article with the channel lineup for that night, the following night on Monday, December the 7th, and the channel signed on at 5:55 p.m. and Cactus Pete came on at 6. So they got that all started with him. So now we're going to look at Jim Boland, and I had to figure out how to know who was who. If there's no glasses on Cactus Pete, that's Jim Boland. If he's wearing glasses, like our guy up here, that is Bill Plater. So this is Jim Boland as Cactus Pete. And I keep looking up there instead of here.
Well, howdy, buckaroo. I'm coming to sit in here kind of fast. Nice to have you with it. Cactus Pete, right here in the country again. We're going to do a cartoon brought to you by Harry Brand New. I'll tell you, Jerry Brand has many fine Jerry products. It's just hard to tell you which would be the best. In fact, I don't think there would be one you'd say is the best of all, but they've got several. See, the Jerry Brand milk, of course, which we take. And there's Jerry Brand chocolate milk, Jerry Brand buttermilk. That's one I like. Let's see, there's Jerry Brand cottage cheese, and over Bruce, you got a choice there. Some folks like the regular cottage cheese, some like the old fashioned. Old fashioned, that's really good. Regular or old fashioned style cottage cheese, Jerry Brand cottage. Then there's Jerry Brand butter, that's the ice cream, that's the best dessert. Jerry Brand sugar. All them fine dairy products are brought to you by Jerry. And what find this Jerry? If I go to that cartoon, that's what makes me think too. Hey, we sure hope you're enjoying the cartoon. The best way you can show your appreciation, is what the one you're going to see buying Jerry Brand dairy products. Now you stood up and picked up. That truck sure got a lot of wholesome in it. You live right after you drink. You know, you can always be sure you'll get Jerry Brand milk. Look right on the top of the carton. There's a picture of a little boy, and he's first. It's the crazy Jerry. our old Cactus like to hear it. You everything like of it. That I know you're getting healthy, strong, you good. You're getting nourishment, and you fight. Well, just remember Dairy Brand is made by Dairy Brand Dairy, one of them that is finest dairy. Now let's get all set for our commercial. Candy. And get that fun. Let's watch you close. You can let it go.
Say, the guy's out of his head. I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to eat me. No, no. It's me. I'm your dog. Remember? Somebody tell him it's me. You can't get away with it. I'm warning you. You'll hang. They'll get you for it. No, no, don't. Oh, pardon us. We're having dinner. Smells good. No, don't let us party yet. You see, well, we were just passing by.
Who is it here, Buttercup Red? Living now sleeping.
Oh, pardon us. Were you having dinner? Don't let us party yet.
Well, won't you fellas come in and have dinner with us? We have plenty to go around.
Yes, sir, Pokey. Certainly learned my lesson. Catch me cold and ugly next one. No, sir. What's that? Well, it's pretty. Working away, it's paradise having no work to do, and taking it easy too. Working can wait.
Well, that was a dandy, all right. Yes, sir. You like that trustee, huh? Isn't that funny? Let me tell you. Soon as the kid told me it was going to be a good deal, buddy. Boy, I got a big question on the week. I think it's going to be good. We're driving the street. That's fine. You don't really want to get dandy, but yeah, I'll tell you, our time's getting pretty short. Sure wish I could get you the number, but I want to remind you now. Number 5 is good. Texas told us, I think that's on fire. Till I get the hair up. Oh, gee. They say put hair on your chest. Well, I'll tell you, Dad, man's got all the fight. Good, strong, healthy, but he gets plenty there. And make sure Mom's got the ice box all the time. Want to do a good dirty quencher, we just run up to the ice box and say, all right? And we'll see you here again next time, right on the same stage. Thanks for being with us. Let's go stop my hall. Go on,
I'm sorry about the volume on the audio, but like I said, we've had issues all week with this, so. Cactus Pete, of course, was a hit. But there were questions about whether or not having a television station in Harrisburg, Illinois, was gonna make it. So here's, first, we've got Bill Plater talking about that.
There was not much chance for a TV station in a small town the size of Harrisburg. And in fact, most people that thought about it very deeply felt that way.
Okay, and then next we're going to have Terry Caldwell again from the 40th anniversary talk about how they could survive, how they had a hitch with the UHF. So he discusses that and explains how they overcame that.
Most TVs made in the 1950s would pick up only channels 2 through 13. If you wanted to watch a UHF station like channel 22, you'd have to buy one of these UHF converter boxes. Put it on top of your TV, go to the trouble of hooking it up. And for a lot of people, that was just too much trouble. The first challenge came from Cape Girardeau.
And then 2 or 3, 4 years later, Paducah gets their VHF channel. And then it got tougher.
WSIL asked for Federal Communications Commission permission to switch to Channel 3. In 1959, they got the okay.
When we went on Channel 3, we reached out about, well, I guess, Indiana, Century, and into Tennessee. We got lots of letters from Tennessee.
So now you can see they are now Channel 3 and a VHS station. By this time, in 1959, Bill Plater had taken over playing Cactus Pete, and he joked at one point and said the only reason he got the Cactus Pete job was because he was the only person on staff that could wear Jim Boland's hat. So now we've got, on our next video, Bill Plater as Cactus Pete and Carl Reynolds as Sheriff Red Eye.
Do you want an explanation of the STL links on there? You know what that's all about on there?
No.
When we went from channel 22 to channel 3, that stands for Studio Transmitter Links. We built a new tower down at Creel Springs, and we had to have a microwave from our old tower in Harrisburg down to the transmitter in Creel Springs, and the microwaves actually had call signs. KSO 47, we had 2 microwaves in case one broke down. The KSO 47 was our old original General Electric microwave, which was our standby, and KSI 70 was the Raytheon microwave. And for a time, the FCC required us to put that on our station ID that we were microwaving our signal down to Creel Springs.
The gentleman you just heard speaking was a cameraman at TV3.
Among other things.
Can you tell everyone your name, please?
I'm Rex Settlemore. I started working, running projectors at the Orpheum over in Harrisburg when I was about 12 years old, and when I was 14, O.L. Turner transferred me down to the TV station where I spent the next 4 years.
And if I understood you right earlier, you live in Cincinnati.
Right.
So I hope you traveled all the way to Southern Illinois just to see this.
Oh, absolutely. Anyway, that's what that's all about on that. That's Bill's artwork, by the way.
Oh, it is?
That is Bill's artwork.
He was an awesome artist.
Yeah.
We've got some examples over here under the glass on the table.
But he, I mean, if you know Bill's artwork, you can recognize it, but he had to make up that special little subplot on there with the studio transmitter links because for a time, the FCC just required that we do that.
Well, thank you. So now we're going to actually see Bill Plater, and that's the Cactus Pete that I grew up with.
All right, and my old buddy, Sheriff Red Eye, just played that 3-point. How are you, Sheriff?
I'm feeling hurt.
Well, good. Say hi to Sheriff. Hi to you, Sheriff. The girls are here.
Oh, is that right? They done something? I didn't see them in here when I first walked in.
Well, they're here. You know what they're here for?
I don't have the flag.
Well, we got a lot of things to show. Just flash off. We got some real fine cartoon books, all through the courtesy of the folks at Terry Brand.
They're real nice folks.
Sure they are. And the boys sure we're going to entertain you with our cartoons. And of course, you know, as we always do, we're going to have to take a little time off here for a glass of Terry Brand. Well, I happen to have a cartoon right in the store there. What do you think about that?
That sure is a coincidence.
I can too, can I? I can hardly wait. Sheriff, why don't you tell the boys and girls about the cartoons, introduce them like, you know?
Oh, yeah, I'd well enjoy to introduce the cartoons. Yeah. If I know what they were.
Yeah. I know you guys. Well,
I'll be glad.
they're real pretty girls.
Here are the cartoons.
And I'm sure you're all gonna remember this cartoon.
Chicago. In another adventure, the Arctic Bird Giant. Our story opens at the Shady Rest Hotel, where Buddy and company have taken a room. And in room 12 of the Shady Rest Hotel, Hutch and company are busy writing another chapter in his logbook about their last adventure. This class hotel is made to order for riding spinners after what we've been through.
I'll take one. The paddlefoot is almost rested up.
Mush! Fire! Mush! Mush! Number 12, Clinton Cardinal Company's room. Wow. I'll get it, Spinner. Oh, why is my old friend Snowshoe Slednick? Over, Clutch Combo. Look to you, Snowshoe. Come on in. Spinner, I want you to meet Snowshoe Slednick and his dog Snowball. You've heard me speak of us.
Yeah, I've always wanted to meet you, Mr. Snowshoe. Do you really have days and nights that are 6 months long, Mr. Snowshoe?
Over.
What does your blue mean, Mr. Snowshoe?
Later, Spinner. What's all the excitement, Snowshoe? What brings you so far from the North Pole?
Much trouble, Clutch Cargo. Our old friend Captain Lowtide, who once saved my life, is in big bad danger. His plans for giant igloo housing project with TV in every igloo have gone poof. His big ships are frozen solid in ice. Big mysterious bird giant after him.
Sounds like the same bird giant I wrote about in my Arctic adventure book. That doesn't sound good. We'd better hurry. Not a moment to lose. Head on it, driver. Clutch and company, anxious to help Snowshoe solve the Arctic mystery, arrive at the airport to begin their northern flight. Almost loaded, Spinner. All aboard, everybody.
But where's Mr. Snowshoe? He disappeared.
Uh-oh, and his dog's missing, too.
It's Paddlefoot. He's telling us something. Snowshoe, look over this way. Follow Paddlefoot. He's somewhere. He knows where Snowshoe is. Ice cream truck? What are you stopping here for, Paddlefoot? We haven't got time.
Yeah, time's away, Battlefoot.
Snowshoe.
And Snowball, what are you two doing in there?
Too much excitement for Snowball and me. We go inside this igloo to cool off.
If we're going to save Captain Lowtide, we've got to get moving. Come on, fellas, back to the plane.
Gee, I hope all your igloos up north have ice cream cones like these, Mr. Snowshoe. Yum, yum.
You fellas are going to get cooled off soon enough. Temperature dropping fast. Time to put on your Arctic clothes.
Oh, very good joke on you, Clutch Cargo. Snowball and we never take ours off. We never take chances.
Weather getting rough. Hang on to your hat.
Oh, your plane worse than my sled on mountain peaks, Clutch Cargo.
Hey, it's snowing.
Oh, we got a much on deck to save Captain Lowtide.
Engines icing up. We've got to fly lower for warmer air.
Clutch, look. Look ahead.
Iceberg!
Can Clutch and company avoid hitting that mountain of ice? Be sure to tune in for the next exciting episode.
Can I interject a point of trivia here?
Sure.
We did not run Clutch Cargo on Cactus Show. Another one of Bill's characters was BB the Clown, which ran a half hour before. The Clutch Cargo series was a 5-minute, 5-part serial that we ran at 5:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then and Bill's character was BB the Clown, sponsored by BB was Bunny Bread. On Saturday morning, we ran, again, BB the Clown, sponsored by Bunny Bread. We ran all 5 parts of it with Bill hosting the previous week's 5-part serial.
Well,
Probably more information than you wanted to know.
no, we need to have the record straight. We're in a library, you know. That's funny because when I was telling my husband that I was going to put these cartoons in, I said I've got to have Clutch Cargo, the only cartoon with human lips.
Yeah.
And I could have swore that, but I didn't look it up. I just
Yeah, we didn't run
assumed I
Clutch
was correct.
on Cactus. That was a separate show.
Well, you all
Right.
Well, what about Space Angel?
Space Angel was part of Cactus.
Oh, good.
That was part of Cactus.
Oh, they were interested. We're also happy that the boys and girls were here with us today. Isn't that fun? I bet 6 months ago have a regular little get together here at the storehouse. All right, it's fine. It's more exciting to get together with the boys and girls, you know. Except maybe to be in Carolina. I wish you were in Carolina. We want to invite the girls and boys to be with us every night at 6 o'clock on Channel 3. Well, that's when you're here. Oh, that's right. I wonder if all was every night out there. Well, that's as always. And of course, the dairy press brings the show just as they're bringing this. And the one thing about it, how many glasses of milk would you say a boy and girl has to drink every single day? As many as they can. At least 3 glasses a day, dairy press milk is out yourself. Well, we sure appreciate you being with us, boys and girls. Hope you'll be watching for it. Say goodbye, Sheriff. Goodbye, Sheriff.
There were some nights when Bill and Carl would get their banter back and forth where we would skip one of the cartoons. Just because there wasn't.
Just let them-
Yeah, we would just let them go because there wasn't, right now, because there wasn't time to run.
And I might mention, because I verified that this was correct, I had noticed on the Facebook page that it said Carl Reynolds later on worked for the FBI. So, you know, you knew him when. They're right there on the screen.
As long as Kirsten career started.
Just kind of slid right into it there. So now the next one is Bill Plater, and he's Cactus Pete in color. Unfortunately, the video from Channel 3 didn't have any audio with it, so I just put a still on here. And you'll just have to, you know, put it in your mind that he is introducing Space Angel, which is going to be our last cartoon.
That also was a 5-part serial. We ran Monday through Friday, one piece each day. Scott, Taurus, and Crystal.
Last time, Scott and Crystal led us on a journey to explore the origin of some strange radio signals from space. As they arrived at their destination, mysterious sounds seemed to come from ghostly shapes. We need to be settled down in the valley. I can see mountains around us. I don't think so, Chris. Indicator shows solid ground. Skipper, are you sure there's solid ground here somewhere?
We're still going down.
Well, I hope we don't chat into the Stardust around those rocks. This place smells dead. Chris, you better stay at the Stardust.
Not again. I want to go too.
Sorry, Chris. Didn't you tell me you needed time to work out your expenses out?
Men.
Hello. See what I see? I don't know, but I'm not feeling very I'm working tools. Beats me. Or is it anything?
$23.18 plus $6.71. Now, let's see. That comes to $29.88. $29? Who's there? Oh dear. What's going on here? How did you get in? I thought you had the door open. But who are you? Or rather, what are you? I don't know. It's a comfortable chair. What do you mean you don't know? Nobody tells me anything. What's this button? Don't touch that. You mean like this? Oh,
Completely down? What could have happened?
you little monster. Now look what you've done. Come in. I'm flying.
Don't miss the next day's time episode.
Now, on the next clip of Cactus Pete, he refers to a trip to the dairy brand plant, and we do not have that footage of the plant. But of course, Dairy Brand was the sponsor for the Cactus Pete show. So let's just have a look at this last clip.
Yeah, that was mighty interesting, wasn't it? Yes, sir. And always remember, you never get too old to drink milk. And when it's dairy brand milk, you're drinking a cup full of good health. And it's got that vitamin D in it that we just showed you about. Also, you know. Now that vitamin D don't cost you a penny more. Oh, sure, not much of that. It kind of works like this. We want to see all boys and girls and your moms and dads enjoy good health. And we figured that if that vitamin D will help it, well, we just put it right in with some milk. And I'm sure that we do. And I'll bet you are too, aren't you? Okay, now, what do you say, let's take a trip down to the dairy brand plant and see just exactly how everything down there is made. Okay, here we go, let her rip. Well, now, what did you think of that? I wish you never took so much time to just to give you a little glass of milk. Of course, after you drink a glass or two of good old dairy brand milk, you know, to make it that good, you get some natural They gotta do a lot of work and take a lot of pains to make it taste so good. Now, the thing that old Cactus is right proud of is how clean everything is. Out here on the farm, old Cactus never thinks much about germs and such things as that, but Dairy Brand wants to make every drop of milk, every bit of ice cream or cottage cheese, and everything else comes out of that big plant, germ-free, and nothing in it but good, clean, wholesome dairy food. Well, I hope you enjoyed our new show, and I sure want to thank you an awful lot for sitting there and watching the Dairy Brand plant operate. And I'm sure you know something now about that vitamin D and what it's for. And most of all, I hope that when you reach for that carton of ice cream, that you'll always reach for and ask for the best. That's Dairy Brand. Well, I've had an awful lot of fun showing you all these things, and I want to invite each and every one of you to be sure to be sitting in front of that television set when Cactus Pete's program is on. Bye-bye now. Be good, boys and girls. There's no stopping halt.
Of course, there were so many clips that I wish we could have had on here, but we would be here pretty late. But there was one that was Jim Golan that struck me funny because he came on set with the shotgun. And he's talking about his gun and he's so proud of it, and then at some point you can just see it dawn on him. Boys and girls, shotguns. Might not be a good idea. So then he starts talking about, but boys and girls, you should never play with guns. Trying to back that out and just kind of make that shotgun kind of disappear. But Bill Plater played Cactus Pete for 18 years from 1955. Now just hold on a minute. Ready? And he also played Ruffles the Clown in Cartoon Man. He was a commercial artist and a cartoonist. He did cartoons and illustrations for many magazines. We're going to watch this last clip, and then his wife, Susan Plater, is going to come up, and a couple of other folks, and they're going to answer your questions. Feel free to share your memories. If you've got your tin cup, put a penny in it. So here we go. This will be the last of our video. Uh-oh, I must have messed it up.
So bad.
Bill, would you get some chairs up here for me? I need 3. Susan will come up with you. Chip and Mark will come up. Right in here, it's fine. So, would you feel better if you had a table between you and your audience?
No, I'm fine.
So we can take questions and comments.
May I say something, sir?
Please do. Okay, please.
Bill was hired on as the art director at the station. So everything that you see, I think he drew. And I would like to say that in one of the interviews that Mark did with Bill, beach for the 50th, 40th, and 50th. But Mark had Bill on air. And so, what are you doing now since you're retired? So Bill just comes up and says, I play golf. So afterwards, Mark said, hey, Bill, we'll have to get together and play golf. And Bill said, Mark, I don't play golf. So when we got home, we got a little chewing out. I'm like, Bill, why didn't you just leave Bill alone? Mark would never, ever call you to play golf. And then also, he did not like milk.
One of the other things that I would like to mention was Elmer the Flea. I don't remember I don't know how many of you remember that. And I had forgotten until I read about it, where he got the magician's cup.
Yeah, it was a double-sided cup. And the way that worked, anybody remember Elmer the Flea?
I do.
The cup, it was a double-sided open cup, and it had a little air hole in the side of it. And if you submerged it with, and it wasn't actually milk, we just used colored water in it, it filled the edges of the cup so that it appeared to be full. And when Bill opened the matchbox, which was the home for Elmer the Flea, and placed him, which you couldn't see, onto the cup, what you didn't see was he very gently removed a little piece of tape that covered the air hole, and when the air hole was opened, then the water, the colored water, the white colored water, drained out from the edge of the cup down into the bottom of the cup. Now the thing you really should understand here too, and I know Susan knows this, and I know our gracious host knows this, everything that you saw here was completely unscripted and ad-libbed. There was no teleprompter, there was no pre-preparation of what was going to take place on the show. And maybe the most significant one, Mark, I don't know if you know this, when Carl Reynolds, Carl and I went to high school together. When Carl started the Sheriff Red Eye character, Bill was totally unaware that it was going to take place that day. That was a complete surprise to him. There were a few of us, Dale, you might have been gone by then when Carl did that. Dale was one of my fellow control room board operators at WSIL in those days.
Stand up.
Dale was one of our first-class engineers. He left WSIL to go to what was then WMAL in Washington, not WJLA, I think it was in Washington. But anyway, there were a few of us who were running the control board who knew what Carl was up to. I was a good close friend of Carl. Off camera too, I should say. Get into that. But Carl had worked out this costume, and Bill was totally, completely, utterly surprised when Carl walked in front of the camera with his black hat and his sheriff's badge on. That was entirely unscripted, and not only was it unscripted, but even Bill didn't know that it was going to take. But he reacted to it so well. If you know Bill, he was totally able to react to that scene and did it just fine.
Okay, I have been reminded, you all were introduced when you were in the audience, so now that you're in front of everybody, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Susan Plater, Bill's widow.
I'm Mark Tellis, and I am really don't know as much as these two.
I know how you feel.
I'm a super fan of Cactus Pete.
Well, I'm Rex Sedlemore, and I'm part of the Johnson County gang who actually ran WSIL. Our chief engineer was from Johnson County. Bill Plater was from Vienna, Johnson County. Graduated from Vienna High School and is an old family friend of mine. We moved to Harrisburg when I was in the 8th grade, and I went to work at WSIL when I was a freshman in high school. Spent 4 years during this time here. Again, went to high school with Carl Reynolds. Carl, by the way, was on the Harrisburg Bulldog team that was defeated. You remember when the Cobden Apple Knockers went to the state tournament? Yeah. There's a very nice chapter in the Amazing Apple Knockers book that describes how Carl was one of the players who almost knocked off Cobden at the sectional tournament in El Dorado that took place in 1964. So I'm from Cincinnati. I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but I'm in town for my 50th high school reunion, and this was going on, and I just couldn't miss it. Bill our primary sponsor for all of Cactus Pete was Dairy Brand. Dairy Brand at the time was owned by the Wilson family. Well, my high school gal friend was Carol Wilson, who was one of the daughters of the owners. She's over in Harrisburg this weekend, by the way, for our 50th reunion. I got to tell her all about this.
Dairy Brand was a local product.
And they had dairies in Harrisburg and in Mayfield, Kentucky. They supplied the milk for most of the schools in southern Illinois. You remember the milk break in grade school? Most of the schools got their milk from Dairy Brand.
We had New Era dairy.
Well, and you see, it's interesting you mentioned that. As New Era started to muscle in more on Dairy Brand, that's really,
That's one thing,
it kind of caused the demise of Dairy Brand.
No, we're good friends. It wasn't that.
Yeah, I went to school with Robert and Ray also, and you know, towards those later years, Ray spent a lot of time. I even drove him around a few places to some of the schools to try to sell the school boards on keeping Dairy Brand when they had decided to make the switch to New Era. That's another story.
Now, I think I'm sure my friend Bill Salis was also Cactus Pete after your husband. There may have been one other. I think Bob Unsel was.
Fred Stacy also.
Who?
Fred Stacy.
Oh, Fred. I didn't know Fred played that yet.
So there were 3 more after?
There were 6 total. And I only know what I know from reading things. I toured the station in '78, and I was in 5th grade then. And I remember Bill a little bit from my early days, and then the other guys who filled in, and then Uncle Briggs took over. And when we saw the show, Uncle Briggs was in the studio, and no offense to anyone, but the studio was just a mess. Everything was, I just remember it being really cluttered, and it was funny because you could just see this set, and there were things just shoved in every corner, and you know, I guess props and things.
How many remember the Beehive show? We saw the clip up there about the Beehive. When WSIL stood up our satellite station down in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, which is still there, KPOB, Channel 15, O.L. Turner, also one Saturday night per month, experimentally, I guess is the way to put it, we ran the Beehive show in Poplar Bluff. And I flew down to Poplar Bluff with OLT a couple of times to help put on that show because he didn't trust the cameraman. Sid Bozarth was the host of the show down in Poplar Bluff. And we took John Van Hoy and we took Jim Cox down to host it. And we flew down from the Harrisburg-Raleigh Airport to Poplar Bluff to put on the show, and then we flew back to Harrisburg after the show was over Saturday night.
What year did the television station leave Harrisburg?
Oh, gee. That's after my time. 1990s, I would say. Early 1990s.
I believe they had moved when the 40th anniversary.
Yeah,
they had already moved.
Yeah, because the clip shows that the building pretty much abandoned at that time.
Right. So it would have been early 90s, I would say.
Of course, you mentioned Jim Cox. Of course, he did that show, The Hour.
Yeah, I talked to Jim yesterday, and Jim, by the way, regrets that he couldn't be here. Jim, like most of us at Channel 3, was a jack of all trades. Jim hosted The Hour. A sidelight, very fortunate. O.L. Turner kind of took me under his wing at WSIL. I was very fortunate to go, on his recommendation, to go to school at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis after I left WSIL. And when I was at Annapolis, Jim had me back on his show as a guest in the summer of 1970.
He had some big names on that show.
He did. Jane Fonda was on the show.
I think Bob Hope was on.
Phyllis Diller.
Phyllis Diller. We actually took this 16mm Oricon that is on display in the Channel 3's lobby right now over to a motel. I was there for that. In fact, I was running the camera when we filmed Phyllis Diller. Who was Doc Severson's predecessor on the night?
Skitch Henderson.
Skitch Henderson. We interviewed him in Carbondale also. I ran the camera for that one too. And again, everything, the interviews that Jim did, totally unscripted. There was nothing written down ahead of time.
Was it Bill that played the character the longest?
Bill, yeah, at 18 years. He started in 1955 when we were still Channel 22.
remember the Bar 22 ranch.
Well, even when we went to Channel 3, we ran the Bar 22 Ranch. And I got to share a little secret to you. We ran it on Saturday afternoon. I was running the control board one Saturday afternoon, and I think Dale was gone by then. Again, we were board operators then. And they were typically 1940s era Westerns, black and white. We didn't have color yet then. We put color in when I was there. That was a big deal. And it was to run within an allotted time slot. And again, it was a 1940s Western. And I had an instruction on there. It was in two 16mm reels to cut 10 minutes out of the second reel, which I did. And I was running that down, and as I was running the commercials, I knew how much film was on those reels, and I could see it wasn't going to fit in our allotted time slot. So I kept the film running when we cut to commercials. It still wasn't enough. We weren't going to, this movie was not going to be over. Bar 22 Ranch that day was supposed to be off at 3 o'clock, and I was supposed to cut to the network at 3 o'clock for ABC's Wide World of Sports. And I wasn't going to be late cutting the network. If you knew how that worked in those days, you weren't going to be late cutting the network, or OLT was going to be down on your case. And so I cut away from the end of the movie, ran my commercials, ran my station break, and went to network. So the end of the movie didn't show. I'm the only one who knows how that movie ended. The one person in our audience who was probably watching Bar 22 Ranch that day, and I'm 17 years old, I'm the only one on duty in the station, called me on the 22 number. You remember 22 was on the right-hand side of the control board, 21 was on the left side of the control board. He called me on the phone rang. I shouldn't have answered it. He wanted to know how the movie ended. That's how seat of the pants we were at Channel 3 in those days.
Well, one of the interviews that I viewed, they were talking about a basketball game at Champaign, and it was being filmed by WSIL because they were 22 still in. And someone would get part of the film and then drive it to Harrisburg.
Well, actually, we didn't film Champaign. The story on that, and again, it's those 16mm Oricon cameras. This kind of started up. Does anyone remember the Elegant Elephant? This was O.L. Turner's son, Guy Lee Turner, was a real star member of the 63-64 basketball team that was defeated by the Apple Knockers. O.L. wanted a pretty good record of his son's basketball play, so we rented the 4 Oricon cameras, and we filmed, not the Champaign, because that was actually carried by an Illinois State network. We filmed the local district tournaments, and not all of them. We filmed highlights from them. And a guy by the name of Walter Miller, who was our theater projection repair guy, when we were done filming those games on Friday evenings, usually they were on some weeknights, he drove the films to St. Louis to be developed because we didn't have the facilities to develop the films, and then drove them back to Harrisburg so that we could put them on the highlights of the basketball after the evening news.
But Linda, you are correct. There was an incident where they bicycled tapes from Champaign to show the first half, and then while they were still driving down the second half, that did occur maybe later, but there was one of those.
We and about the third year we did that, we actually bought a 16mm film developing machine. We had this thing sitting in the control room. Dale, you may remember that. It sat in the control room for about a week, but we figured out how to use it and put it in the dark room. I remember Dale Gibson, again, was one of the control board operators. I remember the day he walked in and that machine sat there and he looked at it and he said, "Is this some Japanese videotape machine?" Because at that time, we didn't have videotape at Channel 3.
And correct, when you went color, it was just one camera.
When we went color, we didn't have any studio color cameras. When we went color, the first thing that we did.
Well, I know the network was first.
Well, the network went first, but in order for us to, it was called pass through. In order for us to, because we were all black and white. I'm sorry, I'm taking all you up with again. I was there when we did all this. In order for us to pass through, that was the term that was used, the color network shows for you at home to watch it, we had to buy two pieces of equipment. One was a color monitor, which we put a little piece of plywood and mounted that in front of our control board. And we had to have a piece of equipment called we referred to it as a stab amp. It was called a stabilizing amplifier, because the stab amp that we had in our control rack would not pass network color.
I'm talking about when you went low
Well,
color.
that was a little bit later. They actually bought, and most of the equipment that we bought, and the color cameras fell into this category, was used equipment.
Yeah, I think they just bought one first, and they only had one color camera, and that's why, if you remember, the 10 o'clock news was all in segments. The weather was first, then the news, then the sports. You never saw, anybody talking to anybody else. They went to a break.
Even in the black and white days, we ordinarily just used one camera, and we had, by the 60s there, the one that you saw on the screen here, the original RCA image orthicon was kind of relegated to secondary status. We used the Vidicon camera. It was made by Sarkis Tarzian, and if you're privileged enough to look into the studio of today's WSIL, back in the corner, it's not even a tripod, but the pedestal for our second camera still sits in that studio. And the great thing about it was it had a zoom lens. So when we wanted to get in close-ups, we didn't have to fade out to move the camera. We could actually zoom the lens in. That was a big deal for us, to have a zoom lens. Nobody ever seen a zoom lens before.
Who made this set right here? The Cactus Pete set, the original, at the station. Who built that and done all the artwork?
Bill did the artwork. Bill always did the artwork on things like that. When you saw, like, our founder and those kinds of things, Bill always did those. But the carpentry work was done. We had a crew of about 3 guys. Johnny Falk was one. He also managed the Orpheum Theater in El Dorado. Walter Miller was the second guy. And Ed Gordon, bless his heart. Those 3 guys together did the grunt work, the nailing stuff together. But Bill always did the artwork.
So who's this guy?
This was our founder. I don't know that he ever had a name, but it was on the set, if you looked on the picture up there, it said our founder.
I couldn't figure out when I was trying to reproduce that, if that was a mustache or a mouth or both.
Only Bill could answer that. Only Bill could answer that.
And I think interesting to note that after Jim Boland left and went to St. Louis, he also did kids program, a long-running kids program up there called Cookie and the Captain. So he was very famous in St. Louis as a kids TV show.
And Jim Cox was on the radio in St. Louis for many years. KECK, he was the newsman, great voice. And Michelle and I took our kids to visit him one day, and he's a great guy. I wish he was here today.
Yeah, Jim Cox will be in the local area on October the 5th. He's quite a musician, you might know also. His daughter works at a retirement home down in Vienna, again, my home, Johnson County, and Jim's going to be in Johnson County on October the 5th doing a music concert for the retired folks in that home down there.
What were some of the other shows, obviously, Clutch Cargo, but what were some of the other shows that Cactus Pete, did he do Three Stooges?
Yeah, but he never called them the Three Stooges. Who said it? He always called them the Three Stupids. He always referred to them, Bill never called them the Three Stooges.
Charlie Chaplin was on there.
Yeah, and we had, you gotta understand, at WSIL, we did a lot of things on the cheap. Right, Dale? We used a lot of, did I say this before? We used a lot of secondhand equipment. We had racks and racks of cartoons in my film room. The film room belonged, that was my personal property, by the way, at that time. And Clutch Cargo had their rack. We did the Mickey Mouse Club, but although Bill painted the background set, it was a Kroger store, it was Claude Moy that hosted that, along with Jim Cox did Need-Eye, the little dummy. But I digress. we have rows and rows of cartoons, and they were ordinarily second-hand, used stuff that had been handed down. I remember one row that we call CBS cartoons. You remember the ones that we call CBS cartoons? And they were some of the cheesiest things you saw, old World War II era stuff, that if you put them on today, to put it politely, they would be politically incorrect. Black and white, of course, referring to Japanese people in less than glowing terms, and so forth. But on the clutch car, I mean, on the Cactus Pete show, Space Angel, the Three Stupids, our CBS cartoons, and then interjected. In about 1966 or so, Charlie Farrar, who you saw on some of the clips up here, was one of the co-owners, was having trouble selling. One of Charlie's jobs was to sell our advertising. He was having trouble selling the 6:30 p.m. advertising slot because that's when we hit the network. So some of our advertisers didn't want to buy the time at 6:28 p.m. coming right off the kids show. So we started running the weather between 6:25 and 6:28. We were going to do a 3-minute weathercast. We would cut away from Cactus at 6:25, go to a 3-minute weathercast, and then do a 2-minute commercial station break, and then hit the network at 6:30. So little things like that would take place. But the afternoon, starting at 4 o'clock, Dale came on duty at 4 o'clock. Drove down from El Dorado. He was always running late. He always had to go to the post office. That was every day. So I had to watch control board and make sure he'd get back from the post office in time. Girlfriend worked for AT&T, rich girl, you know, stayed in contact with her. But 4 o'clock, we ran the hour. Okay, we ran the hour from 4 to 5, busy time. Commercials and some semblance of news, which we tore off of the UPI teletypewriter, you know, no digital in those days. At 5 o'clock, we went to the Mickey Mouse Club, Claude Moy and Jim Cox and D-Dye. Then 5:30, we'd do the 5-minute BB the Clown, which was Bill. Not Ruffles, it was BB the Clown because of Bunny Bread. And that was when Clutch Cargo ran. Again, 5-part serial, Monday through Friday, Saturday morning, 9 a.m. I put the station on the air, and we ran all 5 Clutch Cargos. And then everybody went home, and I was by myself the rest of the day. 5:40, after BB the Clown was over, remember Claude Moy's show, harmonica and playing, we did that. And then, you know how news runs for hours on the local now? We ran 15 minutes of national news from 5:45 to 6, and then Cactus came on at 6.
You talked about doing things on the cheap at Channel 3, which of course it was famous for. Is it true that guys had to go take tickets at the theater?
No.
And then come down and work at the TV?
No, it wasn't that bad. And again, I was a projectionist there at the Orpheum, before that at the Grand Theater in Vienna. But it was a lot of family stuff there. When I left in 1967 to go to Annapolis, I was replaced by one of my fellow projectionists down at the Orpheum, Steve Reynolds, who is still at Channel 3 now, 50 years later.
Line director.
He does a great job. Steve and I went to high school together, and he kind of followed me along there. I visited with Steve yesterday. He still does a great job down at Channel 3. But no, we didn't do both at the same time. Now, again, I'm getting a little bit personal here, but I worked at Channel 3 Monday through Saturday, after school every day, Monday through Friday, all day on Saturday, and on Sunday night I ran the projectors out at the Starlight Drive-In. That's kind of how, for a teenager, I made more money than I knew what to do with.
Wasn't Deputy Dog part of it?
Deputy Dog was part of it too, yeah. Yes, sir.
What was your most difficult day of broadcast? Sometimes, difficult to do it during chronological.
The one I remember was Kennedy's assassination, November 1963. That's one I remember. And you know what? A little trivia there. Dale was probably running the board that day. Jim had Cox had a guest on that he really, really, really wanted on. I mean, in a big way. And he talked us into cutting away from the network coverage of the Kennedy assassination so he could do the hour. Fred Klein and some others really took exception to that, I remember. But we did. And that was, I don't know that OLT was even involved in that decision, Dale.
I don't think so.
I think Jim just jawboned his way into saying, hey, I want this guy on. And network, you can imagine this, network coverage of the Kennedy assassination was a big, big deal, and we cut away from it to run the hour.
Where did Lucky Leroy fit in?
Well, Lucky was prior to Claude Moy in that little 5:30 entertainment spot. You know, bless your little pea-picking heart, by the way, for asking that question. Good Lord will, the creek don't rise. But you know, Leroy moved on and pursued his true vocation as a minister. And he worried about many of our souls. He really did. He really did. The day he came into Charlie Gilman and said, "Charlie, I'm so worried about your soul."
Jan and I went to his funeral a few years ago in Mount Vernon.
A few days ago, I was at the barbecue barn in Harrisburg, and they've got one of the T-shirts from Uncle Briggs.
Yeah.
And I looked and I go, wow, you know, those were pretty popular at IGA. They sold them or whatever. And I looked up there and mentioned something, and they said, well, you remember the Cactus Pete show? And then this morning on the news, they said, hey, we're going to do this program. So it was kind of weird that I saw that earlier in the week, but there's still one there. And a sidebar to that, I grew up in Harrisburg, moved to the Chicago area, and many of my neighbors in the subdivision up there went to SIU. And they said, they started talking about the Cactus Pete show and the Uncle Briggs show. And one guy went into his house and came out with his Uncle Briggs that had to be 25 or 30 years old. He goes, these two shows were, to the students, huge. They thought they had fallen off.
Good call following.
Especially the Uncle Briggs show was very big.
They thought they had fallen off the wagon. They showed up here and watched these shows and would go back and joke about it. And 40, 50, 40 years later, 30 years later, still joke about it when they get together.
And the T-shirt said, Uncle Briggs, that's me, loves you, that's you.
Yeah.
They always said that all the time.
The history room is in the north end of the library, and just outside of the history room is a big exhibit area with a lot of Herrin memorabilia. But we actually have a Uncle Briggs 45 record. And I never thought about it before, but I probably should play that and, you know, and record it off and see if I can get it on our Facebook page. And then I believe we have one of the T-shirts, and there's a photo of him on a float signing one of the T-shirts that someone's wearing at the time.
Does anyone remember Ken Gray? I would hope so. Ken Gray, you saw the little clip up here. In 1959, we were fortunate to get converted from UHF Channel 22 to our VHF Channel 3. And you heard Charlie Farrar talk very briefly. That was because in 1954, KFBS went on the air in Cape Town. And in 1956, Channel 6 went on the air down in Paducah. Kenny Gray was extremely instrumental, influential in getting the FCC to allow our conversion from Channel 22 to Channel 3. And a big surprise should come to you when we bought VHF transmitters for Creel Springs. They were bought used. It was an old water-cooled set of transmitters where almost everybody else in the industry in those days, this is pre-transistor, had gone to air-cooled transmitters, and we had a water-cooled set. We were knocked off the air for a couple of days one time because a relief engineer, in those days we had to have a transmitter man on duty all the time with a first-class radio telephone license. One evening in the wintertime, a relief man left the window open and froze up the heat exchanger. Busted. We had to have a new one flown in from Syracuse, from General Electric, and it knocked us off for a couple of days. Do you remember that took place?
I don't remember. I am so impressed by his memory. I'm sitting there running some of these programs he's talking about, I don't even remember it.
No, it's like yesterday sitting at the control board, though. It really is.
How did the Cactus Pete cups come about?
It was just simply a promotion with Dairy Brand. The idea, the plan was to get you to buy more milk.
More milk.
That's really all.
But the name on the side, I thought I seen on one of the clips where you got the cup and then they sent it off and then engraved it. And then
It
you
was
got it
just
back.
engraved with the Cactus Pete name.
Yeah.
Did he actually sign it, or no?
It was just a machine
Too
engraved.
many things to sign.
It was machine engraved.
One of the things I wanted to mention too, when I started researching and I typed in Cactus Pete, the first thing that came up was your Facebook page.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm pretty much, you know, all over Facebook. But it's, oh my gosh, how did I not know about this? Because that doesn't have anything to do with my job. I just loved Cactus Pete. So tell us a little bit about how you
when,
came to do that.
I think it was 2005. I was going through some of my emails that I printed out from this guy and some other people. You know, I was turning 40 that year. Now I'm 50. And no, I was going to turn 40 in a couple of years. I was still 38. Anyway, digress. I started, you know, you start to kind of look at your childhood and get a little nostalgic and think, well, 40, 50, 40 years old. And I Googled, you know, looking for Cactus Pete, and there was just nothing out there. And I thought, you know, this whole story, I knew about the little TV station out in the middle of nowhere, and, you know, this is an amazing story, really. And Cactus Pete, and we grew up with him. I said the only thing missing from your set, because you work so hard, is the smell of supper wafting in. That's what I remember watching Cactus Pete, and his mom was always cooking, you know. But when I went to search for Cactus Pete, there was just nothing. I thought, you know, kids, I try to tell them, I'm a school teacher, I tell my students about it, and they, you know, and with their attention spans ever, I mean, that clip of just the end was up there so long. I mean, our attention spans were way better back then. But so I just started Googling. I did find 2 Springhouse magazine articles about Cactus Pete. I ordered those, and I talked to Gary Daniil from Springhouse, and then he got me in touch with Bill, and then Bill and I became friends just through emails. And I did talk to him on the phone a few times, and I meant to get down to see him, and I just never did. Susan and I are friends on Facebook, but we met in the flesh first time today. I see Dale and Rex and all these people who I've corresponded with, and it's great to be here today. This is awesome. This just tickles me to pieces, because so many years ago there was just nothing, and you know, all of us who remember, and this is just so good for you for doing this. Thanks a lot. So then, with the advent of Facebook, you know, you can go out and make your own group for anything. So I just thought one day, I said, let's do this, you know, and we have over 1,000 members on there, and I've done very little, you know, I uploaded a few pictures, and it's just been.
Well, it's a great page. And you know, a lot of folks, when I ask them, are you on Facebook, they, no, I don't want to do that. But you can go on Facebook and never friend another person, but join groups like this with people that remember, you know, someone like Cactus Pete, and it just makes you feel good to just talk about it, you know.
And if you know anybody who's trying to get on, we're kind of picky about adding people, because we've had a lot of people who are putting ads. They just want to friend us, or they want us to let them in the group so they can put their ads on there. So I always go and make sure they're a real person before I do that. So if you know anybody who's trying to get on, have them message me, or any of the administrators.
Well,
do you have one?
Do we have one here? I think we have one here.
Do you guys have a website or something?
We have one here.
We have the
There's one over here too. There's another.
And I think they cost a dime when they first came out. I think you sent in your parts of the milk cartons and a dime.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you took it to the grocery store. You took your money and your envelope with your name and address and your carton, and left it at the grocery store, and then you could go back a few days later and they would have your cup there for you. We are past time. Anyone who wants to go ahead and leave, that's fine. If you want to stay and keep talking. But I have one more thing I want to ask about, because I can't remember the whole story. Something about Bill Plater just sliding in right before he was supposed to go on the air so he could give you a heart attack.
No, not so much. You know, again, he was busy during most of the day, and then you had the 2 kid shows, you had the BB and Cactus to do in the evening. And, you know, when he was done with the artwork and their slides at the end of the day, he might leave for a few minutes.
Well, I read that he had a time where he could leave an establishment and get to the station, right? Yeah. and-
Nobody's naming it, is it? I know what it was, if you want to talk to me later.
Well, thank you all so much for coming. Feel free to continue to talk. Refreshments.
Dale's got maybe a story to tell here.
Okay. I'm going.
I am so sorry I missed the first half. I had heard something about this a while back. I thought I put it in the calendar. I didn't. I just happened to talk to Rex on the phone a few minutes before 1 o'clock, was it?
Yep.
We are. And, oh man, I don't have time to make that. But I made it half after the hour. I could probably talk quite a while, but I started to work there in April 21st, I think, of '65, and I left in September. No, I started April of '60 and left in September of '65. And on my last day there, Bill had a brand new baby, and he was giving out cigars. He was a boy. And they were having a little goodbye party for me there in the control room. And so I'm thinking, I've never smoked before. I guess if I'm ever going to try to smoke something, especially a cigar, this will be the day to celebrate. And I lit that thing up, and I turned green, and I got so sick. I never touched another one. Y'all keep bringing so many memories back. And I got to think what to talk about and how to cut this real short. I never got a tin cup. If anybody has an extra, I think the tin cup days were before I started there. But I remember Cactus would, I guess they'd invite the kids to write in, and I don't know what, tell something about themselves, or ask for a tin cup, or I don't know what. I remember some of my so-called friends one day, to my surprise, and I think I was watching and I could remind them. Some of my probably high school friends in those days, I think we were already in high school. But anyway, they wrote in something about this from little Dale Gibson. And, oh golly. I gotta cut this short. I mentioned Claude Moy, somebody did. He was also known as Pipeline Pete in his early days.
In Chicago.
Yeah, WLS in Chicago. And he lived grew up in Ridgeway, retired back to Ridgeway, and started being on air at Channel 3. And he taught Les Paul Mary Ford. He taught Les Paul how to play the guitar. Talking about getting on the cheap. Well, it was a tight budget, I'm sure. And I worked weekends when I first started. Probably worked weekends until I left. And I would be the only person in there a lot of times on Saturday and on Sunday.
Yeah, that's the way it worked. There was just one of us there.
Ed Gordon.
When you left, it was me.
Ed Gordon, the custodian, would let me in. I remember on Sunday mornings at 11 o'clock. I didn't even have a key. But he was late, I was late.
I must have been pretty important. I was 17 years old. I had a key.
Ed was the first employee in the station. I'm sure he didn't make much money. But he was the first employee to have a color TV. And I remember OL offering to help him out with the payments or something. No, sir, I paid cash for that TV. The one big mess up I had one time, this is what I started to say about being on the cheap. With 1 or 2 people working on the weekend, OL wouldn't run the air conditioning. It was too expensive. So all the equipment was tube type equipment then. And it got hot in that control room. So you wear shorts and you pull off your shirt and you go in. I'd go in at 11 a.m. and work till
Sign off.
Sign off.
Sign off.
So, yeah.
Sunday was a one-man shift all day, from sign on to sign off.
When you take your lunch, and you eat right there while you're sitting at the board or doing whatever you're doing. And one Sunday night, I was still living with my parents at the time, and my mother was health conscious, and she'd make me a couple of thermoses of hot food and stuff. And so I'm sitting there at the board, finally got time to eat, around 9 o'clock, 9 something, and I got sleepy. We're supposed to leave the network and go to a local film at 10 o'clock. And a little while before I fell asleep. And I missed running the 9:59 commercial. And I wake up 6 minutes after 10, I think, and coming down the network line is Alex Dreyer and the local news, Chicago News or some news. They would feed it down to AT&T in Evansville, and then Evansville would feed whatever we're supposed to get. But anyway, we're supposed to go local. And I wake up, and I don't have the right program on the air. And I actually pinched myself. Is this really happening? So I just switched out of it, ran my commercial late, went into the movie. Of course, we had to write up a script. We had a discrepancy report. Anything that didn't go right, you got to write it up. And OL loved to put these things on the bulletin board for everyone to see. I'm trying to think what I wrote. I just wrote what happened. I never heard a word. I was so surprised.
The station at that time had it really wasn't a bulletin board. It was a framed board about so wide and so tall. It was painted light green. It was called discrepancy board, and it had all of our names on it. And one of the office secretaries, her name was Mary Siskey, her name is Mary Bowers today, living in Harrisburg. On her way home at 5 o'clock, if we had had a discrepancy from the previous day, she didn't stay and talk with us. She would, on her way out the door, she would, and it had to be pasted. She would slap that thing on the board and head out the door, because if John Van Hoy was working, she was going to hear about it. It had all of our names. If you made a mistake, you got advertised.
Do you remember when I was mentioning the Starlight Drive-In Theater in El Dorado? Remember back in the 50s sometime there was a pretty big storm that came through, and it did serious damage to the theater screen. And on the marquee out front then, where they would always put whatever current movie is, when that happened, guess what was on the marquee? Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind.
What happens when you went to Washington and got a job just like this, and you felt you didn't get him enough?
Well, yeah. When I left there, I had gotten an FCC first-class license to run transmitters and things. And so during my last year or so, I would spend the one day at the transmitter creel screens. Then on Friday, I would drive down to Poplar Bluff. And we didn't sign on until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. No local programming during the, well, no local programming at all at that time.
They carried ours.
Yeah, just retrans microwave hops the Harrisburg signal down Poplar Bluff, and we just still doing that.
I think Bell Smith Springs, I think, is still there.
Well, and I remember the first day I went down there, and again, I was the only person running the station at that time. No local programming or I'm going to cut in with some local commercials with slides. But anyway, my first day to go down there, I was driving a 59 Ford Galaxy, and I had 2 flat tires on the way down. And somehow I caught a ride, and I don't remember if I got the transmitter on the air on time or not. But I would sign off the station that Friday night and stay in a mobile home that OL had out back. And then I'd do the same thing Saturday evening, and we'd run a really late movie on Saturday night. And so I'd drive home to El Dorado on Sunday, my only day off, so I didn't really have a day off. So I did that for a while and decided to look around. Every job I would check out, they'd offer it to me, and I didn't want to leave home, so I didn't take it. The last one was WGN in Chicago, and I'm driving home, and I'm saying, you fool. Next good offer that comes along, I'm just going to take it and think about it later. And so I went to New York World's Fair, I stopped in Washington to visit my cousin overnight, and I decided to check out a Washington station. I went to the nearest one, and I'll make this long story short. But anyway, I wrote a brief, filled out a brief thing. What are you doing? What are you now interested in? I get back to El Dorado, and my parents said the chief engineer had called 3 times. So I had to go back for the interview. I signed off late Saturday night. I think I slept an hour and a half and drove to Evansville to catch an early morning flight at 6:30 or something. And the chief engineer in Washington came in on Sunday morning to interview me. Long story short, I got a job. I called Mary Siskey and her to write my resignation notice because I'm still, in Washington, and I'm not going to be home for a day or 2. And so she wrote my resignation notice, and I gave a date 3 weeks out. And so I get back here, and Noel says, well, 3 weeks, that's not very much notice. Well, I wanted to say, well, 2 weeks is traditional. I don't think I even said it. But it was a smart move on my part. I stayed at the Washington station 38 years, and Washington being the news capital of the world, it was an interesting place to do what I did.
Excuse me, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
I can't hardly refuse to do this since we got all this wonderful memory attached here. But I was in high school between 1963 and 4 years back. And sometime during that time, I remember going to the studio at Harrisburg. And on Channel 3, we did a string puppet show for something called the Talent Hour. The amateur, and it was all local kids did talent show on Channel 3. Does anybody remember that?
Yeah, that was prior to the hour.
Okay.
Yeah, your memory's right.
Okay, we're going to need to close, but Susan has a story to share with us.
I do sort of, but anyway, I'm going to bypass it. I just wanted to say, because I did have it in my notes, Bill himself was a very humble person, very kind and generous, and so I did watch him as, growing up like everyone else did, but when I met him, and he was a fine person.
Yeah. Mrs.
That's an understatement.
Is Mrs. Cactus Pete here on the scene? Mrs. Cactus Pete here?
Not that I recall. Not that I recall.